Okay, can everybody hear me? It seems like people can see me. Okay, this is awesome. Things are happening today. Now I just have to bring up my notes because drastic reboot. Sorry, just take a minute to open. You have technical difficulties a lot in a makerspace. I guess I've been not too long out of the library to realize that just turn it on and off. Duh. Okay, let's see. I just want to see the notes. Okay, so we're going ahead and get started. I guess I'll read through the messages a little bit later when we have time for questions and answers, because we're already 5 minutes behind. So my name's Abby Phillips, and I'm a postdoctoral fellow in the Department of Instructional Technology and Learning Sciences. And this is here in Utah State, so I may be a good distance from some of you. And this is my first Library 2.0 conference, and pretty excited to talk about some of the maker stuff that I've been learning over the past year and some of the research I've been doing, and trying to combine the practitioner side with the research side, because I think they're both really critical to one another. So I'm going to talk about making in more of an approachable way than I've encountered before. No sound? You have sound? Okay. Sweet. Doing good. You'll go away. No. Everything's popping up on my computer, of course, right now. So again, I'm going to talk about making in a more approachable way than I've encountered. Some of it will come from interviews and just basic conversations that I've had with librarians. Sorry, the messages are kind of... Here we go. I've had with some librarian friends, and some of it's going to come from ongoing research that I'm collaborating on. It's an IMLS funded grant into making in library. So I'll go into a little bit more detail right in a little bit. But so title of this presentation is Finding What Fits, Approachability of Makerspaces in Making in the Library, in case you were curious if you were in the wrong session. Let's see, advance to the next slide. Here we go. So this is just a brief layout of why we're here. First, I'm going to do a little bit of what is making. You've probably already attended a couple of workshops that talked about making, but why not look at it from a little bit different perspective, or maybe the same perspective? We'll investigate that. And then some more into what making really means in the library. And I'm focusing on outside of the actual physical makerspace and looking at the idea of making within the library more broadly. And then I'll talk about the research that I'm conducting with some other people here at USU, and I always like to show in presentations how research benefits practice and practice benefits research. And then we'll go over a little bit of the design for making, some of the findings that we found, and then on to what does this all mean for you all, and a couple of future directions and help in case you need it. So next slide. So when we think of making, what does that really mean? There's lots of terms: the maker movement, maker culture, making, being a maker, makerspaces, fab labs, idea labs. I've seen some places, tinkering studios. So there's lots of terms, and specifically the terms makerspace and making can be very exclusive and kind of intimidating. And making also, making with a capital M and makerspaces with a capital M have become kind of more of a business, more of a commodity, and the whole maker fair idea, instead of down to the roots, just people messing around with stuff, tinkering and just playing. Also, makerspaces have more traditionally been made up of white male middle class users that usually have some degree of skill or expertise. I worked in an adult makerspace, a community makerspace back in Tallahassee, Florida, when I was a grad student at Florida State. And it was mostly men. They had all these kind of really heavy duty equipment, like woodworking equipment and soldering and laser cutters and 3D printers. And so they basically went there with their own project in mind and to use the tools that were already there. And so when we're talking about makerspaces in the libraries, especially when you're thinking about youth, which I'll be talking about a little bit more focused on because my research tends to be on youth, it's a little bit different. And there's so many different types of makerspaces. There's the community makerspace I just mentioned, academic. Our engineering school here at Utah State has a makerspace. I think they call it an idea lab too. The academic libraries are getting lots and lots of them. And here in the department where I work, Instructional Technology and Learning Sciences, we have a design lab, which is a little bit more focused on kind of STEM learning. And also schools are building smaller makerspaces. Next. Oh, and I had to add, moved on too fast. So I had to, in a little bit, some of these slides, I used pictures from our actual study. So I had to use pseudonyms, just so you know, I'm using pseudonyms. And I wanted to give some kind of idea of what I'm talking about when I mean maker, and maybe what everybody means. It means that a person who makes or produces something. So we all are makers at some time or at some point. And makerspaces and making is not just 3D printers and laser cutters. It's not space determined. It doesn't have to take up a space in the library where it just sits. So what as librarians can we do to support patrons, especially youth who desire to make and learn and really change the world, either locally, nationally, or both? And some of the great stuff about making is that it really supports both youth and adults with problem solving and creative thinking. I like the kind of idea of failure positive that comes out of, there's a study by Martin Lee that is about the greatness, the fantasticness of making with that failure positive nature. So it really makes you think about how to resolve this problem and why didn't this work out? And it also supports STEM and STEAM learning, which is really becoming a pressing need in libraries, particularly school libraries, where there's this big push for STEM learning. And how do we increase STEM learning within our youth? And also promotes lifelong learning. It gives, for youth, it really gives them a chance to see that there's this whole world outside and the library can be part of it, and there's all kinds of interests that they may not know they have. And with adults, it just keeps them really engaged in new technology or just new ideas, just new things, what's going out in the world. So this is a picture of a makerspace in one of the public libraries that we're working with in this study. So it has a 3D printer and some kind of VHS converting to DVD situation and some gaming equipment, and that's about it. It's rarely ever used. So what does making in the library look like? It can be high tech or low tech. Some of this may be already redundant to you all, but there's a lot of sewing. Some of the low tech stuff that I've seen that has been really cool is sewing, button making, Legos. I've seen lots of Lego tables, Lego walls at school libraries, which are great because they not only give you a chance to make, but also kind of encourage collaboration between kids. Instead of being it's a partially isolating activity, but it's also collaboration. Kids are really getting to talk to one another and just participating. Squishy circuits, if you're not familiar with them, it's kind of like Play-Doh, and you get some coin cell batteries and an LED light, and you create a circuit. It's much like paper circuits. You're really creating a circuit, but with squishy circuits, since Play-Doh is conductive, you can make a light up. And same with paper circuits. It uses conductive tape that can make a LED light up. And the focus in library making is that it's on learning, sharing, which is really traditional in libraries, and participating and collaborating. So instead of just do this thing, we can all do it together. We can collaborate with one another. I've seen a lot of kids in some of the middle schools we've been working with, helping one another figure out problems and get ideas from one another and what they should be doing. And it's part, like I said, just kind of highlighted, is part creative, but it's also part social. It's really getting a feel for your peers or mentors around you, and also as part educative. It can be combined, especially in school libraries, it can be combined with some of the curriculum that's already happening in the schools. One of our librarians is setting up a computer just for Scratch, because one of the technology teachers is teaching more about coding in Scratch. So she's going to have a system there already in place just for kids to come in and play around with Scratch. Dragging over my notes again. And there's also, you're all are probably aware of this conversation about creating versus consuming within libraries, where we're all moving towards, or this is what has been suggested, we're moving from consuming information to more of a creating information. Whether you agree with that or not, is just, you can see some of this taking place in the maker community. Really, you're creating knowledge, and you're building a foundation to grow from. And so researching libraries, that's what I've been doing for the past year and a half. I'm gonna go over this briefly because a lot of this is old school to you all. So again, with youth that I'm focusing on, school and public libraries are really great sites for connected learning. And I'm not sure if you're not familiar with connected learning, I just got back from a conference that talked all about it. So it's not a new idea, but it's focused on students, usually youth, pursuing passions and outside interest with a lot of support from peers, parents, community members, and mentors. And it's really community-supported learning experience, and usually integrates some degree of technology, whether it's social media or makerspaces. Like Chicago's really built this up into their U Media Lab. And I think Miami has one, and Los Angeles has another one. And libraries are really great as a research context, because there's this whole exploration of current and really potential interests, and you can do a lot of media creation, especially now that there's more making opportunities. And as you all know, libraries support both formal and informal learning, so they're really unique sites for research. So they differ from school and home, but right now there's not a lot of scholarly peer-reviewed literature, not even close to a lot. A small amount about making in public and school libraries. It's really slowly emerging. I can move this button. So what I've been looking at, and others, we've been looking at how small school and public librarians can really work with youth to facilitate maker-oriented libraries, or maker-oriented activities. So we're really focusing on how we can help the librarians provide these services for youth, and what kind of supports do they need to develop these interactive technology-enhanced spaces and programs that really make kids want to learn more and really grow. And so there's a lot of constraints. I'm sure you're familiar if you work in a small rural school or public library. Some of them are time, budget, staffing, professional development opportunities. And so we've been really working on trying to develop pamphlets, personal and professional training materials that are really easy for the librarians to feel empowered to design better spaces and better programming. And so this is just an example of one of the materials we provided or we created. It's kind of hard to see, but this is about e-textiles. If you're familiar with it, it's where you kind of use felt or other fabric, conductive thread, a tiny Arduino and a coin cell battery to create something that lights up, like a patch or a little pocket or some kind of funny animal. So we created pamphlets that are informed by our observations and librarian feedback, and also some professional training materials that were also librarian geared and youth geared. And they included templates for teens that you could just pull out and give to them. And they were very brief and explanatory. We learned quickly that sometimes reading, you just want pictures to help you get through it very quickly. And we're developing some YouTube videos that will also go through. And we came across, what I wanted to highlight here is 3 kind of key takeaways about makerspaces. There needs to be room for some what we call transgressions, but it's really where you find libraries more welcoming when they're convening in exploration spaces, when the libraries permit these small behavioral transgressions, such as eating in the library, noise, playfulness, shifting around the space for comfort and accommodation, like they did at North Hollow, where they actually have shelving that can move apart, and they could pull up the couches. This is during one of their normal Thursday night teen events where they're doing video games. It's kind of contrasts with Northern Hollow or Northern Trove Middle School, where it's more constrained. It's more of a traditional school library approach. So it's lots of very formal tables and chairs. There's not a lot of room for flexibility or even for student flexibility in behavior. So in a maker environment, you really want a good bit of freedom. And again, similar, it's flexible design and layout, which can also be pretty affordable. There needs to be accessible and semi-enclosed areas where youth can congregate and spend time informally with friends. And with maker-oriented programming, the preference really is for allowing youth to have more control over who can see and access what they're doing. And so at Autumn Falls, it's a big open space. They have lots of beanbag couches and beanbag chairs and couches, and they're starting to implement some really fun designs and ideas for students that they can move around and sit together, and it's really playful furniture. And again, this is Northern Trove Middle School. I'm sorry, I'm going kind of fast because we don't have a lot of time. It's a large open space, so it has really formal tables set up in rows. Again, that standard school library setup, and it's all within sight of the circulation desk and a mirror, so the students can be seen at all times. And understandably, I imagine, don't to completely ignore youth, but it does limit some of the privacy of youth and mobility, and that is important when you're making. Sometimes it can be something you just want to work together with friends without somebody kind of hovering over you. And I advanced my own slide, but not you all slide. Is that the same one? Programming. So at Northern Trove, they have a set maker activities during homeroom. This is Northern Hollow, but Northern Trove is the school library. So they have during homeroom, it's 20-minute periods. So despite school announcements and sign-up opportunities, students didn't really attend. And most of those who did attend were already in the library for homeroom anyway. But at North Hollow, our Makey program, which we did right here, it already supplemented an existing program. They already had a teen night every Thursday, and they also had a very popular video game night. So we incorporated Makey, which is basically kind of a video controller that you hook up to conductive materials to do the up, down, left, right, enter. And so we did it with Pac-Man, and they had a lot of fun with that. So instead of creating entirely new programs, you can add it along to the programming that's already existed. Because they tried at one time to do a coding club, and also they obviously had some missteps with the Makerspace, and that just was rarely attended. But a lot of success happened with the Makey, and we're going to do it again because we had a lot of requests for that. We visited a TAB meeting not too long ago. And finally, some youth ownership and partnership. We're starting up with some teen advisory boards in school libraries. North Hollow already has pre-existing TAB But here's a teen advisory board for one of our middle schools. We're really focusing on getting teen involvement, because so much of the makerspace, the other things that I showed you, the other design ideas, it really relies heavily on the librarian as the authority figure, facilitator, and designer, and drawing from and relying on youth expertise to guide the design of the library's makerspace and maker programming. So we really want youth to be the center, youth-centered approach towards learning. And ideally a teen advisory board, and also this teen designed and organized Lego table really get youth to feel more empowered in the library and feel a sense of ownership and partnership with the library and be really seen as their spot. So potential steps and some more takeaways. After doing some reading and just thinking about it for a while, I think a first step is doing a community assessment. Even if it's possible, even a small one, you really want to ask questions like, who is your audience that your programming will serve? Are you going for teens or tweens or young adults, or like emerging adults, or just everyone? So who are really the stakeholders in these programs? Who do you really need to reach out to? And even if you can do just a small scale community assessment, I've done these in the past, and I remember taking a master's course during my MLIS, and it was kind of fun just to get more of a feel for your community. And then second, connecting with your library mission and purpose. And I think sometimes this is missed in some of the experiences with other library friends and librarians that I've been interviewing. You really want to know, what are the goals of your maker program? What do you hope to come out of it? Do you have an end goal? Is it set, like maybe summer reading program? You want to do some maker activities, and it's going to be a short-term thing just to test it out. How does your program really align to the mission of your library? You want to make sure that you're supporting the overall mission of your library and what the values of your makerspace, how they contribute to the mission. And again, you want your maker programming, or even if you develop a makerspace, I'm not discouraging from doing it. I'm just more of a supporter of small scale maker programs. You really want to further the goals and the mission of your library, not just a thing to tack on just because it's buzzworthy, what the idea of maker and maker movement is. And a librarian friend and I went out for a drink last night, and he made fun of me for saying this. I know it's cliched, but it's true. Thinking of the library as a space for making. People are just important as the tools in the program, and the space is important, but you can take up a table or whatever. The focus is on people and how they're working together and what they're using to create and how they're creating stuff and what they feel about at the end of it. What outcomes do they really enjoy? What did they take away? And again, a little bit more into staffing. I don't know how often people consider staffing, your staffing structure, how is it okay as it exists? Does it need to be changed, or to support maker development in your library? Is it possible right now for you to provide larger scale maker program? Maybe you just need to do some smaller stuff like a small Lego table or squishy circuits. What's your staff capacity? How much can they take? Who will really be involved in this? Do they have an interest in making? And I think this is an important one. Number 4 is reaching out to community makers. Because being a subject expert is not required. I don't know a lot about coding. I don't know much about 3D printing. You don't need to know everything about those things, or studio equipment, or whatever. You can bring in community makers. I've read about several libraries that bring somebody from a local makerspace. They bring the 3D printer in for a night of the person will just go over all the great things about the 3D printer and just give some demonstrations and talk about it. And he or she is already somebody who's going to be super enthusiastic about it. And I've read some other people who do bring in local artists and musicians to demonstrate how music is developed and how how you can go into a studio and create music, or just how the process of creating albums, creating songs works. And the great thing about this is you're reaching out to people who are really passionate about what they do. And it's also another opportunity for community engagement, getting the library even more involved in what's going on in the community. And finally, take time to evaluate the program, however you prefer to evaluate your, or however you already assess your programs. Maybe you do a survey, or maybe I remember in the last library I worked in, it was all how many people showed up. And well, there's a lot of argument, it can be a lot of argument against that, where there's still a lot of debate about how to really evaluate a successful school library program, public library program. But I think, and a lot of the things is really reflecting what did you, what happened? What would you improve upon? What do you take away from the whole maker experience? Was it a positive one? Whoa, I did not advance the slide. I'm sorry about that. Ta-da. So these are a lot of links. I saw Make Do Share at Digital Media and Learning Conference just last week. They do amazing stuff. I'm gonna collaborate with them soon. And the Make It Take It is in Idaho, just fantastic work. And some other guides for you all, some reads and listen. I particularly like Adam Savage because he talks about failure in making, which is a really cool idea, and lots of other professional resources. So Teen Librarian Toolbox, if you're interested in youth librarianship, and Library Journal did a pretty decent article about programming not too long ago. So we were right at 3:30, and I have lots more. So please reach out to me. And now I'm looking at your, sorry, I kind of blocked the messages because I was very focused. So this is my Twitter handle, my email, my professional website. Shout out to the USU team that I'm working with, and IMLS, who is funding the research that we've been working on that I mentioned earlier. Let's see, anybody else? Questions? I've read a lot about pop-up events, really cool. Heather Moorefield-Lang, if you got to see her, she was at the keynote. She wrote a journal article about mobile makerspaces that you can take out either to people who can't access the library, or who, or just schools, different other libraries. In this. Any other questions? I don't know if this is different. First time using this, I'm used to Blackboard. So usually people can raise your hands, because I am more than willing to answer questions. Yes, the presentation slides will be available. And I can also give you my notes. I can send you articles or whatever you want. I can send you more resources, because I was going kind of fast, because I had way more to cover than 30 minutes. Would anybody like to take a turn at talking? I think the closing session is starting, but awesome. So I hope this was helpful to some of you, ideally all of you, but let's see, I'm trying to think of the best way. Oh, that's Heather Moorefield-Lang. I can also send you that article. It's kind of cool. Looking up real quickly in my Zotero. Makerspaces. It's called When Makerspaces Go Mobile, Case Studies of Transportable Maker Locations. But I can also send that. Yeah, I wonder if it'll give me a list of emails of people who attended. Or if you would, Oh, cool. I would love to hear more because I'm still, mobile makerspaces are kind of, yeah, they are fairly new. So I'm interested in that. Okay. Just jot down your email. I'm sure it'll give me a list of potential of the participants. So, but if you want to say write down your email, I'm more than happy. And I know the recording will be available if you would like to hear me stumble through everything again. Thank you. I didn't realize I'd be on video, so I wore a concert t-shirt, and I hope you all like Jason Isbell. Thank you so much for attending. This is fun, once I got all the tech issues over with. I'll just hang out for a little while if anybody has a question. Okay, bye. Oh, thank you, Lacey. And if anyone has suggestions for me,